Hello, welcome back to Gunfighter Life. As always, I am your host, Michael Melito, a very blessed man. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I make no apologies for that. It's first and foremost in my life and everything that I do. God is number one. I fall somewhere after that. So you don't have to be a Christian to listen to this podcast, but know that that's part of my life and everything that I do, and this podcast is no different. So just be aware of that. A little bit about me and why I do this podcast. I wanted to give you guys a real-world perspective based on real-world experiences, and I've been very blessed to have a very varied background in firearms and shooting and gunfighting. So I do wish that wasn't part of the world that we live in, but it is. And there's a great quote by Jeff Cooper. And I might not get it exactly right, but it's something to the effect of an unarmed man can only flee from evil, and evil is not overcome by fleeing from it. It's a great quote. So if somebody's got to stand up against evil, if you're a good man, you got to be armed to do that. If we're talking about a physical warfare, not a spiritual warfare. Anyway, a little bit about me and my experiences. Grew up shooting at a very early age. Some of my earliest memories and my earliest photos that I have are me walking around with a gun. Grew up shooting and hunting and fishing at a very early age in the South. It was just part of life back then and in that area, and I'm very blessed that I was a part of it. And I did my first formal shooting competition while I was still in school. I was still a boy. Won my first gold medal while I was still a boy. Did my first formal competition, I believe in 1998. Won my first gold medal, I believe in 2000 or 2001-ish, 2002-ish, somewhere in there. State level championship. Very blessed to have been part of that. I've done everything from precision rifle to steel challenge pistol and a bunch of other stuff in between. If you don't know, that's like drag racing with a pistol. I've won state level championships and regional level championships. Gold medals. I've won more shooting competitions than I can remember. God's been very good to me in that regard. All kinds of disciplines, from action pistol to precision rifle and muzzleloader and archery and shotgun. I've competed in all of it, even hatchet throwing for, if you name it. I've competed in a lot of stuff. Been very blessed. Joined the Marine Corps at 17. Did 2 combat tours in Iraq in the infantry for the initial invasion, and then again afterwards. So 2 combat tours in the infantry, which is a professional gunfighter. I was an assaultman, which doesn't exist anymore, but that's specialized infantryman. So I did that, and by God's grace, made it back in one piece, not because I'm anything special, but because He chose to keep me around, and I'm very thankful for that. After that, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. I taught urban and desert warfare, part of Mojave Viper. After that, I went to work for LAPD. I worked regular assignments and more specialized assignments. I worked some of the most dangerous streets in the country in LA, doing different assignments, obviously carrying a gun. And by God's grace, I made it out of that in one piece. So I have that experience. I've also been a professional firearms instructor for many years, FBI certified, handgun instructor, NRA certified, a bunch of other 3-letter government agencies certified, at least one other 3-letter government agency certified, and handgun instructor. I've done it professionally for law enforcement, for civilians, you name it. I've been very blessed. I've worked as a private contractor. I have worked as, I also served in the United States Army, both full-time and part-time, National Guard in a few different states, a couple of different MOSs, most of which were combat MOSs. And right now, my job is I'm very blessed to be the commander of a tactical team, a response team in a fairly large metropolitan area. That's gunfighting is, the backbone of what we do, and I'm very blessed to be the commander of that. So it's very much part of my day-to-day life. God's seen fit to allow me to make a way in this world with just a Bible and a gun and a simple man, and that's all I really need. So if you're listening to this anytime soon, when it comes out, the crazy times we're in right now with the global pandemic and riots and everything going on. I do another podcast. It's called the Alpha Male Podcast. I just did another episode on what's available right now in guns and ammo you can get right now. So if you're interested in that, go give that a listen. Right now, this is going to be the next sequential part of survival guns, doing a series on survival guns. We did shotguns, 22, and the battle rifle all in different episodes. So if you haven't given those a chance, go back and give those a listen. This is going to be handguns for survival. This is where we're talking about handguns. So, why do handguns exist? Handguns do not exist because they are more accurate, because they are more powerful, because they are more effective. Handguns are a thing because you can have them with you all the time and they don't weigh a lot. They're very maneuverable and they're very concealable. That's why handguns are a thing. Obviously, you can't walk around with a ton of guns. You generally one long gun and a handgun. I love handguns. I've done most of my competition shooting with a handgun. I've won most of my competitions. Most of the things that I've won have been with a handgun. I love the handgun. But a handgun is a harder tool to master. It's inherently less effective. It's less effective at stopping fights than a long gun, either a rifle or a shotgun. So we use the handgun not because it's the best tool. If you said that I had to get in a gunfight today, first of all, I would try to avoid being in that place in that time. But if I had to, and I had to pick a tool, I would pick the rifle or the shotgun depending on the circumstances. The handgun is a tool. Why cops carry it? Because they can have it with them all the time. It's kind of hard to do other tasks with a long gun if that's not your primary job is gunfighting. Now, I do carry a long gun as part of my job, but I also always have a handgun on me and I practice with it all the time because it's a tool that I can have with me all the time. It's also a tool that I can conceal. Unless we're talking some ridiculous scenario or some kind of thing where I'm having it in a vehicle or something, it's pretty hard to conceal a long gun. So that's why we have handguns in the first place. Handguns require dedication. You could be pretty proficient with a rifle and practice a couple of times a year and stay pretty proficient, but a handgun requires a lot more practice. I tell my men, and I try to every day, unless there's some crazy exception, to dry fire 15 minutes a day every day and to go out and try and shoot at least once a week, hopefully more. So to stay fairly proficient and stay on your game, that's like a minimum. And you can go longer without shooting live fire, but you need to dry fire all the time with a handgun to stay proficient. It's a skill that needs to be practiced. So let's talk about you got your big 3, your 9, your 40, and your 45 for caliber. And now I switched to 9 when I was a cop, long before it was a trend. I'm talking a decade ago or more. I switched to 9. I can't remember exactly the year, but I switched long before it was a trend, when everybody was going crazy for the 40. And I did that because I actually shot different. I started competition shooting like action pistol, and I started shooting guns on the clock, and I saw how much faster the 9mm was and how much more affordable it was. Even when I reloaded, I started off competing with the 45, and I realized even reloading, I could just practice and shoot much more with the 9mm. And while you could argue the 40 or the 45 is a little bit more effective, what's really effective is hitting your target. And if you practice more, you'll be more effective. That's just a reality. And if I can, unless I have a blue sky budget and somebody, even I don't have a blue sky budget to get all the practice that I want and all the ammo that I want. So if I can practice more with a 9mm, I would give up a little bit of that power and a little bit of the millimeters for being able to train more and practice more. So I settled on the 9mm long before it was the new hot thing that the FBI went back to, because they realized the same thing. And so I would say, unless there's a good reason, like you already have one or you get a sweet deal on a police trade-in, the 9mm really is it if you want a good all-around defensive gun. The 9mm is it. I love 45. I've got a very nice Colt Combat Elite 45, super accurate, great gun. But it's not my go-to every day. I dry fire with it a lot because I have it and it's got a great trigger. Very heavy, but very, very good trigger. So it's good for practice, but it's not my go-to carry all the time gun. It's not even my go-to concealed carry gun. The vast majority of my handguns for defensive use or for work use are 9mm, and there's a reason for that. I prefer 147 grain 9mm. I prefer Spirit Gold Dots. I prefer either Spirit Gold Dot 147s or Ranger T 147s. That's just me. I'm a ballistics nerd. I like the heavier 9mm high sectional density bullets. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. Especially right now, you're going to have to get what you can get. I would say the reason I like the Spirit Gold Dots and the Winchesters is they both make loads with the Train and Defend and the Winchester, and the Spirit Gold Dot and Spirit Lawman, where the training rounds and the duty rounds shoot in the same place. It does you no good or very little good to do a bunch of practice with 115 grain and then you shoot 147 for defensive loads or 124, because they almost certainly will not shoot in the same place. So you're conditioning yourself to shoot a different place than what you need to shoot. May that be an issue or may it not be an issue? I don't really know, but it might be an issue, so I'm going to do what I can to mitigate that. If I'm just, doing a close quarters contact shot at 2 yards, is it going to matter? No, it's not going to matter. But if I do have to make a more precision shot, it will matter. So why would I waste that money, even if it's cheaper ammo, if it's shooting in a different place? So that'd be my little advice on ammo. Right now, like I say, take what you can get, take what you can find. Obviously, the military uses ball because they do for policy reasons, but you should never choose for defensive use. You should never choose ball rounds if you can get, or if your location allows you to have, expanding ammo, expanding hollow point ammo, whatever you want to call it. Get a good proven track record round. Don't go with the whiz bang round. Don't go with the next hot thing that's a super light bullet at super high velocity, or the next crazy thing that comes out with some crazy name. Get something with a good proven track record. Another round that I really like, that I used for years in law enforcement, I don't use it anymore, but it's the 9BPLE. It's been used by law enforcement for decades, at least 10 years, because I've been using it that long, and I had boxes from 1996. So 9BPLE made by Federal. It's a great round. Generally it's pretty available and pretty inexpensive as far as duty ammunition goes. I'd look at that. But just get something with a good solid track record. When we're talking about guns, I own a Glock. When I go to training courses and stuff, I will sometimes run a Glock because most of my guys run a Glock. I'm not the biggest fan of Glock. They work, they're cheap. If you want a gun that's general purpose for the general purpose cop, and you're not going to be a specialist and you just want a simple, effective gun that works, the Glock is probably it. If you're talking about an all-around defensive handgun for survival, I would say the Glock is not a bad choice. I would say as reliable and as good and made in America is a Smith & Wesson M&P. I've won most of my competitions with a Smith & Wesson M&P, so I would really give the M&P a look. I've never found them to be any less reliable than a Glock. I know Glock people will say that's heresy, but I'm just giving you my experience. I like an M&P. I find them much more ergonomic, and I don't think you're giving anything up. So if you want something made in America and you like the rugged reliability of a Glock, I would say look at the M&P. And there's a ton of different options out there. My go-to for work and for my go-to is an STI. That's a pretty expensive gun, but my life depends on it, and I'm not going to go for the bargain brand when my life depends on it or somebody else's life depends on it. I run an STI. I like the STI. I also really like Berettas. I don't run one at work because I'd have to run it with the hammer down, which I don't want to do. I can run the STI with the hammer back, but you should look into the striker fires are the hot thing right now. But I really like a hammered gun. They have a much better trigger in general. I would really look at your hammered guns. You can look up single action only or double single action or double action only. You can look those up, and you can look up striker fire and see the difference. It's better for you to look that up and just look at a picture of it to understand it than it is for me to try and explain it on an audio podcast. But look those up. Look up the differences between those. And I would say get out and try some. Don't just pick a Glock because everybody runs a Glock, because that doesn't make it the best, because everybody does it. Everybody does a lot of things that aren't good. Nothing wrong with a Glock. I would just say do your own research and do your own things on that. Other handguns for survival: revolver. So I carry an STI all the time for work, but I'm not concealed carrying a full-size STI most of the time because it's a big gun. So my concealed carry gun usually, or my backup gun, is a Smith & Wesson J-frame. The first handgun I ever bought, and I still use and I still carry all the time, is a Smith & Wesson J-frame. I have two. One's a 38 Special Plus P, one's a 357 Magnum that I generally mostly carry 38 Specials in because I can get faster follow-up shots. But the revolver is a great choice for survival. I would say you may have a better chance of finding ammo for those right now, but a good concealed carry gun, good revolvers have a lot of advantages. You can make contact shots, meaning with a semi-automatic, if you press the muzzle up against the target, you can put it out of battery and the gun won't fire. With a revolver, you can shove the muzzle right up into what you're shooting and it will still fire. That's a big advantage, especially in CQB, especially in close quarter stuff. Another big advantage of those is there's no magazine to lose. So if you go hiking or something like that, covering a lot of ground, I have had before where I've inadvertently hit a magazine release and then you drop your magazine and then you're out all that ammo. You can't do that with the revolver. Revolvers obviously are inherently limited, anywhere between 5 and 8 rounds. There might be some out there that hold more, like a 22 that holds 10 rounds, but generally between 5 and 8 rounds is your capacity on a revolver. Most gunfights take less rounds than that. I say most. So that is an inherent disadvantage, but generally doesn't come into play. Also, with a revolver, a big advantage, especially if we're talking about all-around survival guns, is with a semi-auto, you have to have a pretty uniform, there's like plus P ammo, but it's a pretty narrow margin, because if you don't have enough power, the slide won't cycle properly, and if you have too much power, you have the potential for breaking the gun. So you have a very limited range. With a revolver, since you're manually rotating and putting new ammunition in the gun, then you can shoot very, very mild ammo and very, very hot ammo if the gun will handle it without any reliability issues. So if you're talking about taking game or something like that, that's kind of an advantage. You can load it way, way down or way, way hot. So, a general mid-size revolver in 357, 38 Special, or 44 Special 44 Magnum would be a good choice for kind of an all-around gun, an all-around handgun. So you've got that advantage. People say they're more reliable. I don't agree with that. You can get very reliable semi-autos, probably as reliable. And the thing about revolvers, if they have a problem, generally it's a big problem. And revolvers do have problems. Revolvers do jam. They do malfunction. Generally, people that say that don't shoot them a ton, and they don't shoot a ton. If you shoot a revolver enough, it will go out of time. It will jam. It can malfunction, just like anything else. So I would say they're more forgiving of neglect than a lot of semi-autos. So they have that going for them. One of the big tips I'll also give on handguns is don't trust your life to anything that's not proven, whether that's ammo or the handgun. Don't buy the next hot handgun that comes out, because no matter how good the manufacturer is, no matter what, generally it happens a lot. I wouldn't say most, but it happens fairly frequently that a new handgun will have issues. You don't want to, if this is Gunfighter Life, this is not go out and plinking. This is not plinking podcast. This is Gunfighter Life. If you're going to be training for a gunfight, or hopefully you don't get in a gunfight, but if you are, you don't want to trust your life to something unproven. Don't go out and get the new whiz-bang thing on the cover of a magazine. My general rule and what I tell my guys is if it hasn't been around at least 3 years, don't trust your life to it. If it's going to malfunction and have issues, let somebody else find that out. You don't need to be finding that out. You're a professional gunfighter, or you're a defensive gunfighter, whatever your thing is. You don't want to find out that gun has a recall or an issue, if that's the gun you're trusting your life to. Let somebody else figure that out. Give it a couple of years. If there's any kinks, somebody will find out and will figure it out. It happens with revolvers. It happens with semi-autos. It happens with the big name brands. It happens with new brands. It happens with whatever. So if a new model or a new something comes out, don't trust your life to it. I don't care how good the advertisement is. Get something that's been around a while and that's proven. There's been no radical new changes in handguns lately. There's a couple of little refinements here or there, but much more important that gun is reliable. You need to make sure that gun is reliable. You need to make sure it's reliable for you with the ammunition that you use. I've had handguns that were generally very reliable. The brands were very reliable, and I've had ammunition that was like top notch, but for whatever reason, that gun would not function correctly with that ammo, even though they were both very good quality, high name brands. Don't just assume. Don't trust your life to anything unproven. Don't get a box of the next whiz-bang duty rounds that have a great reputation. It might be great rounds, but you don't run them through your gun because they're too expensive or whatever. Don't just assume that it's going to work because it's a good brand and a good brand of ammo. You have to know, and you have to know where that handgun's going to shoot, and you have to train with it. So that's what I would say for handguns for survival. I would say hunting. I didn't mention the hunting in my bio. Normally I do, but I've hunted everything from gray squirrels on the East Coast to prairie dogs on the West Coast, and elk and deer and wolves and bear. And I've been very blessed to do a lot of handgun hunting. I've taken a lot more. I would say that I've taken more deer with a handgun than a lot of people have ever taken deer. I've taken a lot of deer with a handgun, but you don't hunt with a handgun because it's generally the best tool for the job. In fact, I can't think of a situation where it'd ever be better than a rifle or a shotgun. You do it because you want the challenge, or because you find yourself in a situation where you have a handgun and you want to take a deer and you can make the shot. But you would never, like if my goal was to put meat on the table and I could choose between rifle, pistol, shotgun, handgun, I would never take a handgun. You do it because it's what you have on you, or you do it because you want the challenge. So, can you hunt with a handgun? Yes, I've absolutely taken several animals with handguns, including many deer, but not because it was easier. So for a survival situation, can you hunt with a handgun? Yes. If you're looking for an all-around handgun that'll do both, I would say look at either 357 Magnum or 44 Magnum or 10 millimeter. They're probably your best all-around. If you wanted things that would do both. They're not the best at defense and hunting, but they're a good middle ground, so I'd look at that. Next thing I'll talk about is the 22 handgun, and I really like 22 handguns because up until recently, it's fairly affordable to shoot. You've heard my background. You've heard what I do, and I carry an STI 9mm 1911 day to day. I have Glocks. I have all kinds of. I'm very blessed to have very nice guns. But most of my live fire training I do with a 22. Because if I'm practicing the fundamentals, which is the backbone, it should be the backbone of all your practice, I can do all that with a 22. If I'm practicing my draw, I can do that with a 22. If I'm practicing my reloads or things like that, I can do it with a 22. I can do it cheaper, and I can do it more. Like I said, unless you have an unlimited budget, you could buy a lot more up until recently, because it's hard to get any ammo right now. But in normal times, you can get a lot more 22 for $100 than you can get 9mm. And I would rather get the more practice in. And every once in a while, go back and confirm and make sure that, like I would set up my 22 to shoot in the same place, same point of aim, point of impact as my 9mm or my whatever my go-to gun was. But all the fundamentals are the same. All the fundamentals of training are the same. 22s are great for training. 22s will work for defense. They are obviously not a first choice for defensive gun use, but enough people have been stopped in what they were doing by a 22 to know that they're not ineffective. Are they the most effective? No. But the handgun is already a trade-off. So the 22 could be pressed into a defensive role if you absolutely had to do it. Obviously, hunting small game with a 22 is great. 22, especially if you're talking about survival. So I've done a lot of hunting, and in a real crap at the fan scenario, you're probably more likely to encounter small game, especially if you're trying to move from one location to another to feed yourself. Small game is probably more likely than large game, and like I said, a handgun is not the first choice for hunting, but it's what you happen to have on you, and you have a 22 on you, and you can take that small game. then that's definitely a viable option. So I would say the 22 handgun would be a viable choice for a survival handgun. And it should be a backup tool anyway. So if it's a backup tool and a backup tool that allows you to take small game, that's great. The 22s, also you have a great choice for all-around handgun for learning skill and practicing and being able to conceal it, and all-around use and small game hunting would be the different 22 revolvers. 22 double actions are great, but kind of spendy. You can get you used to be able to get Heritage Rough Riders, which are 22s. You could get the 22 revolver and 22 Magnum interchangeable cylinders for less than $200, which is crazy cheap for a handgun. I had one. I did a lot of training with it when I used to teach kids how to shoot. I would teach them on that, and it was a great gun, great handgun to learn on, great 22 handgun to learn on. It would be a great cost-effective gun to learn on. Ruger makes one called the Single 6. They make some other different models, but basically the same thing for a little bit more money. A great all-around choice. Very, very proven design. Very classic design. I really like for 22 semi-autos, if you're talking about dependability and accuracy, you're looking at your Ruger Mark 1, 2, 3, or 4. Take your pick. They're all great. I've owned a bunch of them. I own one now that's great. I do a lot of practicing with it. I was out practicing with it earlier. It's a great gun. Also, they make a lot of replicas. If you have a common handgun, like we're talking about Glocks or MPs, they make those in 22. So if you want something effective to train with for survival, for gunfighting, I would say that those would be a good option, because you can get one in 22, get one in 9mm. Then you've got a backup. You can use the same holster. You can do the same drills. You can do the same draw practice, all that stuff. So I would say definitely give those a look for all-around survival. I would say, obviously, for survival, the handgun is a tool that you can have with you all the time. You might find an environment where you can't be openly armed, so the handgun might be the only tool that you have. So we're talking about survival here. So make sure, like I said, that handgun is an art. You have to practice it. Some people are naturally better than others, but you have to practice the handgun. It takes skill and mastery. It's an art and a science. You really have to kind of put the time and dedication into that handgun. So I would encourage you to do that. If you find yourself in a situation where all you have on you is a handgun, you want to have confidence in it and be good with it, and that requires practice and dedication. So more important than anything else with a handgun, get out and practice and train. You don't become a gunfighter by accident. You become a gunfighter. It's a discipline. It's a I guess we used to say a lifestyle. So get out and train. Get a good quality handgun. But everybody gets, like, I don't even know. Handguns have so much like bravado around them about this gun's better than that gun and this caliber and that caliber. Get out and train and be able to hit your target and have a good, reliable handgun, and practice. That's it, guys. Thanks, and have a blessed day.